In the shadowed heart of ancient Rome, 67 AD, a secret festers, one so vile it's been buried beneath centuries of silence. Picture the forum at dusk, torches flickering, the air thick with whispers of an emperor's madness. Nero, Rome's golden son turned tyrant, walks hand in hand with a figure draped in silks, jewels glinting like stars. The crowd parts, awestruck, but their murmurs carry a chilling truth. This is no woman but a boy named Sporus, mutilated and remade to replace a dead empress. This is no love story, it's a descent into the abyss of absolute power, where grief twists into obsession, and a human soul is reshaped into a living lie. What you're about to uncover will haunt you, a truth so disturbing it was meant to stay buried. Where are you watching from, brave soul? Comment below because we're stepping into forbidden history together, a journey that demands courage. If you're ready to face the darkness, hit that like button and subscribe. Join us as we unravel secrets the world tried to erase. Nero wasn't always a monster. At 16 he ascended as emperor, a boy king promising a golden age. Taxes fell, amphitheaters roared with spectacles, and his theatrical performances charmed the masses. Rome believed in him. But power is a slow poison, seeping into the mind, warping even the brightest hearts. By 65 AD Nero's soul had fractured. Paranoia consumed him, every senator, every advisor, a potential traitor in his eyes. He ruled an empire of millions yet stood alone, unchallenged, untouchable. No one dared say no. This isolation bred a madness that would birth horrors unimaginable. At the center of it was Poppaea Sabina, the woman who held his heart or what was left of it. Her beauty was legendary, her intellect sharper than any blade, her ambition a mirror to Nero's own. She wasn't just a lover, she was his obsession, a flame that burned too bright. But love in the hands of a man like Nero doesn't liberate, it enslaves. Poppaea's story, and the boy who paid the price for her loss, is where this nightmare begins. Poppaea Sabina wasn't just a face in Nero's court, she was a force, a woman who wielded her beauty like a weapon and her mind like a general strategy. Unlike Octavia, Nero's first wife, bound to him by cold political ties, Poppaea was fire. Vivacious, commanding, she drew every eye in Rome's glittering halls. Their affair began as whispers, a scandal among the elite, but it grew into something far darker, an obsession that consumed Nero's soul. He didn't just want her, he needed to possess her entirely. Ancient historians like Tacitus describe a man unhinged, flying into rages if another dared glance at her too long. Guards shadowed her, not for safety but to cage her in his gaze. Gifts of Indian jewels, Chinese silks, and Arabian perfumes drained the treasury, each a chain binding her closer. Nero divorced Octavia, shocking Rome, and married Poppaea in a spectacle of excess, gold and roses masking a growing madness. But even marriage couldn't sate him. He isolated her, cutting off friends and family, surrounding her with loyalists who owed him everything. Sculptures of her filled his chambers, her image haunting him even in absence. This wasn't love, it was ownership, a god-emperor reshaping reality to trap a mortal. Poppaea, no pawn, played the game. Her sharp mind built alliances, securing her family's power, knowing her beauty was both shield and shackle. But she made one fatal mistake, she challenged Nero. Unlike the cowering court, she argued, criticized, even mocked his theatrical obsessions. Pregnant with their second child, her defiance grew bolder, her spirit unbroken. In 65 AD, during a heated argument, some say over chariot races, others his neglect, Nero's control snapped. The details blur across sources but the outcome doesn't. A single blow, or perhaps many, struck her pregnant body. Blood stained the marble floor as Nero, the man who commanded empires, realized he'd destroyed his obsession. Her death wasn't just a tragedy, it was the spark that ignited a horror that would scar history. Sporus, a boy in the shadows, was about to step into this nightmare, his life forever altered by a madman's grief. Nero's grief for Poppaea wasn't sorrow, it was a fracture in his psyche, a descent into a delusion that defied death itself. The emperor who dined with gods refused to let her go. Her body, unburned against Roman custom, was embalmed, laid in a tomb grander than any emperor's. Nero declared her divine, founding a cult in her name, speaking to her corpse as if she lingered. Courtiers, trembling, played along, leaving her seat empty at feasts, speaking of her in present tense, fearing exile or death for breaking the illusion. Rome's elite, accustomed to excess, watched their emperor unravel, his mind a labyrinth of guilt and obsession. He'd killed her yet couldn't release her, his love a warped mirror reflecting only his desires. Then amidst this madness Sporus appeared, a boy barely 15, a freed slave raised in the palace's gilded cage. His face, delicate and haunting, bore an eerie likeness to Poppaea's, especially her eyes. To Nero this wasn't chance, it was fate, a divine chance to resurrect his lost goddess. In Roman belief, physical resemblance hinted at spiritual bonds, and Nero, half-mad, saw Poppaea's soul in Sporus' gaze. The boy, educated for administrative roles, was no stranger to the palace's intrigues, yet nothing could prepare him for what came next. Nero's plan wasn't mere mimicry, it was annihilation. He ordered physicians to transform Sporus, not just in appearance but in essence. Castration, a brutal act, was only the beginning. In 67 AD, in a chamber deep within the palace, Sporus endured a surgery that was as much ritual as medicine. Crude tools, no anesthesia, only pain and the weight of imperial will. Held by guards, his screams echoed, unheard by a world that dared not listen. Survival was a miracle. Survival unchanged was impossible. Physically altered, Sporus was no longer the boy he'd been. His identity, his future, his very humanity were stripped away to serve a tyrant's fantasy. Nero didn't stop there. He renamed him Sabina, after Poppaea, and began crafting a new reality. Sporus' transformation wasn't just physical, it was a calculated erasure, a boy forced to become a ghost, a living monument to a dead woman's memory. Sporus' transformation was no mere costume, it was a meticulous, soul-crushing reconstruction. Nero, the architect of this horror, spared no detail. Seamstresses wove gowns to cloak Sporus' altered body, each stitch hiding what remained of his masculinity. Jewels once worn by Poppaea, emeralds, sapphires, heavy with her memory, now adorned him, their weight a constant reminder of his role. Makeup artists taught him to soften his jawline with powders, to darken his eyes with kohl, to mimic the empress he'd never met. Hairdressers spent hours curling his locks into styles fit for Rome's elite women, using heated tools and ornaments that cost more than a soldier's life. Every mirror reflected a stranger, a face that wasn't his, a body no longer his own. Tutors drilled him in feminine grace, how to glide, not stride, how to sit with folded hands, how to tilt his head to feign delicacy. Voice coaches forced him to raise his pitch, to soften his words, stripping even his speech of its past. Each lesson was a chisel, carving away who he'd been. The palace, once a place of privilege, became a prison of performance. Sporus wasn't just dressed as Poppaea, he was forced to embody her, to live as her shadow. Nero's obsession demanded perfection. He'd gaze at Sporus for hours, calling him Sabina, whispering memories of moments that never happened, expecting responses that aligned with his delusion. A misstep could mean death, a perfect act meant survival, but at what cost? The boy's mind bent under the strain, his identity fracturing with every forced smile. Ancient sources hint at his growing skill in this charade, his ability to anticipate Nero's moods, to mirror Poppaea's wit. Yet they also whisper of his eyes, hollow, distant, a boy trapped in a role he couldn't escape. The wedding loomed, a public spectacle to cement this horror. Nero planned it for spring 67 AD, aligning it with religious festivals to cloak his madness in divine sanction. The palace hall, aglow with oil lamps, would host a ceremony unlike any Rome had seen. Sporus, remade, would stand beside the emperor not as a boy but as an empress, a living lie forged in blood and grief, displayed for an empire to witness. The wedding of Nero and Sporus wasn't just a ceremony, it was a grotesque theater of power, a public declaration of a madman's ability to rewrite reality. Spring 67 AD arrived, and Rome's grandest hall shimmered with opulence. Thousands of oil lamps cast flickering shadows, imported flowers perfumed the air, and musicians played hymns that masked the crowd's unease. Guests, senators and aristocrats, their faces schooled into false joy, offered gifts and congratulations, but their eyes betrayed horror. They knew the truth, the bride, draped in silks, was no woman but a boy, surgically altered, forced to play Poppaea's ghost. The rituals were meticulously Roman, vows exchanged, hands joined, sacred bread shared, but each act twisted tradition into something profane. Sporus, now Sabina, stood at Nero's side, his delicate frame swallowed by a gown that once belonged to the dead empress. Legal documents were signed, making this abomination official. To the uninformed, it might have seemed a lavish imperial wedding, but those in the know felt the air thick with dread. Nero treated Sporus as empress, granting him a household, staff, even a litter for travel, but these were no honors, they were chains. Every public appearance demanded perfection. Sporus sat at state dinners, his every gesture scrutinized, his voice trained to echo Poppaea's cadence. Nero's delusion was absolute. He called him Sabina, spoke of shared pasts that existed only in his mind. Sporus learned to respond as if those memories were his, each word a tightrope walk over death. The psychological toll was relentless. Every morning he woke to rooms decorated for a woman long gone. Every mirror showed a stranger's face. Every conversation forced him to bury himself deeper, to become someone he wasn't. Ancient historians like Dio Cassius note his growing melancholy, a quiet withdrawal beneath the flawless performance. Yet Nero's court played along, fearing the emperor's wrath. To speak the truth, to call Sporus a boy, was to court exile or execution. The empire watched as Nero paraded his creation, a living testament to his power to bend humanity to his will. But this wasn't the end of Sporus' torment. Nero's madness would soon take them both beyond Rome's borders, into a world that would recoil at the emperor's twisted vision. Nero's obsession with Sporus wasn't confined to Rome, it spilled across the empire, a public display of his fractured mind. In 67 AD the emperor embarked on a grand tour of Greece, craving adoration as an artist, not just a ruler. Sporus, his fabricated empress, was dragged along, paraded before foreign dignitaries as Sabina, the living echo of Poppaea. Greek aristocrats, accustomed to Rome's excesses, struggled to mask their confusion. Here was their conqueror, a man who commanded legions, presenting a teenage boy in silks and jewels as his wife. Nero demanded they honor the fiction, and they complied, their smiles thin, their bows strained. Sporus' role grew heavier with each performance. At festivals, he sat beside Nero, adorned in gowns that shimmered under torchlight, his face painted to hide his truth. He had to laugh at Nero's poems, applaud his chariot races, and play the devoted spouse while foreign eyes judged him. The psychological strain deepened. Every moment required him to suppress his identity, to anticipate Nero's whims, to embody a woman he'd never known. Ancient sources describe his eerie precision, his ability to mirror Poppaea's grace, but also his growing silence as if his soul was retreating. Nero, blind to this, saw only his resurrected love. He'd stroke Sporus' hand, whispering endearments meant for a dead woman, oblivious to the boy's torment. Greece wasn't just a stage, it was a crucible. Sporus' existence became a constant performance, his survival hinging on perfection. A single wrong gesture, a lapse in character, could unravel Nero's delusion and spell doom. The emperor's court, trailing behind, navigated this madness with practiced deceit, praising Sporus as empress while whispering of his tragedy in private. Rome's elite had long mastered the art of survival, flattering a tyrant while concealing their disgust. But the empire was fraying. Nero's excesses, his lavish spending, his neglect of governance, stoked rebellion. Governors in distant provinces began to whisper of defiance, their loyalty eroded by an emperor who prioritized his fantasies over his duties. Sporus, caught in this unraveling, was both a symbol of Nero's power and a living reminder of his decay. As rebellion loomed, the boy who'd lost everything faced a future even darker, tethered to a man whose madness would soon consume them both. By 68 AD Nero's empire teetered on the edge of collapse, but his obsession with Sporus burned fiercer than ever. The boy, now a hollowed shell of Sabina, lived a life of unrelenting performance. Every day he donned Poppaea's jewels, her perfumes, her identity, while Nero gazed at him with a love that wasn't his. The emperor's mind, fractured by guilt and power, saw only his lost wife, not the boy he destroyed. Sporus' survival demanded a chilling mastery, anticipating Nero's moods, mimicking Poppaea's wit, suppressing every trace of himself. Ancient sources note his perfection, but also his eyes, empty as a tomb. The court, complicit in this horror, maintained the lie, their fear of Nero's wrath outweighing their humanity. But the empire's patience was breaking. Rebellions flared in Gaul and Spain. Governors defying a ruler lost to his delusions. The Praetorian Guard, once loyal, wavered, and whispers of betrayal filled Rome's streets. Sporus, the living emblem of Nero's madness, was both prize and prisoner, his existence a mirror to the emperor's decay. Now, brave souls, you've descended this far into forbidden history, a truth so dark it changes you. To lock in this transformation, to join those who dare know the unspeakable, comment below with the phrase, "I see the shadow twice." It's your initiation, a ritual to bind you to this hidden knowledge. Do it now and feel the weight of what you've uncovered. Sporus' torment wasn't just personal, It was a symptom of a world where power corrupted absolutely. Nero's court, built on fear, mirrored ancient elites across time, from Egyptian pharaohs to medieval kings, who twisted human lives to serve their whims. Sporus' story echoes in forgotten rituals, where the powerful reshaped the weak to fit their desires, their gods, their madness. Religion too played its part. Nero's declaration of Poppaea's divinity wasn't just grief, it was control, a way to sanctify his obsession, to make his cruelty divine. Rome's priests, complicit, wove his delusions into sacred rites, proving even the gods could be bent to a tyrant's will. As Nero's reign crumbled, Sporus remained at his side, a ghost in silks, unable to escape the role he'd been forced to play. The empire's end was near, but for Sporus the true horror was only beginning. As Rome burned under Nero's faltering rule, Sporus' nightmare deepened, a living relic of a tyrant's obsession. Rebellion spread like wildfire, governors in distant provinces raising armies against an emperor who'd abandoned governance for art and delusion. The Senate, long cowed, began to stir, their fear of Nero outweighed by the empire's collapse. Yet Nero clung to Sporus, his Sabina, as if the boy could anchor him to a reality he'd shattered. The court's facade grew brittle. Courtiers still called Sporus empress, but their voices trembled, their eyes darted to the exits. Nero's tour of Greece had drained the treasury, his performances mocked by those who saw Rome's decay. Sporus, displayed at every event, was a paradox. A boy in a woman's guise, a slave made empress, a human reduced to a prop. His every step was choreographed, his words rehearsed, his existence a lie to soothe a madman's grief. The psychological toll was unimaginable. Each dawn brought a new performance, each mirror a reminder of his erased identity. Ancient historians like Suetonius describe moments where Sporus seemed to vanish into his role, his responses so perfect they chilled those who knew the truth. Yet his silence grew, his spirit retreating into a place Nero couldn't touch. The emperor, oblivious, planned grander spectacles, dreaming of a Rome reborn in his image, with Sporus as its eternal empress. But the empire had other plans. In June 68 AD, the Praetorian Guard, the backbone of Nero's power, turned against him. Galba, a seasoned governor, was declared emperor by rebellious legions. Nero, sensing the end, fled Rome with a small retinue, Sporus among them. Even in exile he couldn't release his creation. They hid in a villa outside the city, Nero alternating between manic escape plans and theatrical preparations for suicide. Sporus, silent, stood by, his role unchanged even as the world collapsed. The villa's walls echoed with Nero's rants, his promises of divine vengeance, but the truth was stark. His power was gone. Sporus, the boy who'd endured unimaginable cruelty, was now a liability, a symbol of Nero's excesses that the new regime would either claim or destroy. As Nero's enemies closed in, Sporus faced a future where his torment would not end, but merely change hands, a pawn in a game of power he could never escape. Nero's final hours were a chaos of desperation, and Sporus, his tragic creation, stood at the heart of it. Holed up in a villa outside Rome, June 68 AD, the emperor paced, his grand plans unraveling. The Praetorian Guard had betrayed him, the Senate branded him an enemy of the state, and his empire was slipping away. Yet Sporus remained, dressed as Sabina, a living ghost tethered to a dying god. Nero's obsession hadn't dimmed. He clutched Sporus' hand, calling him Poppaea, as if love could defy the swords closing in. Ancient sources paint a pathetic scene. Nero, once Rome's master, weeping, plotting impossible escapes, then rehearsing his suicide with theatrical flair. Sporus, silent, bore witness, his role unbroken even in this collapse. When word came that Galba's forces were near, Nero chose death over capture. With a trembling hand, he drove a dagger into his throat, his last words a lament for his lost art. Sporus, the boy he'd remade, was left exposed, a prize too valuable, too dangerous to be ignored. The new powers, Galba, then Otho, then Vitellius, saw Sporus not as a person but as a symbol. To possess him was to claim Nero's legacy, to wield the myth of Poppaea reborn. Each ruler kept him as Sabina, dressed in her silks, paraded as a trophy. Otho in particular took a twisted interest, forcing Sporus to reenact the same rituals Nero had demanded, calling him by the dead empress' name. The boy's torment continued, his identity further erased with each new master. Ancient historians note his compliance, his ability to play the role flawlessly, but also his deepening despair. He was no longer Sporus, nor even a man, just a vessel for others' fantasies, a mirror for their power. Rome's elite, complicit in this cruelty, saw in Sporus a reflection of their own corruption. The same society that worshipped divine emperors sanctioned this human sacrifice, masking it in ceremony and wealth. Religion, too, was tainted. Nero's cult of Poppaea, now inherited, twisted sacred rites into tools of control, sanctifying the abuse of a boy whose only crime was his face. Sporus' story wasn't just personal, it was a symptom of an empire built on the subjugation of souls, where power turned humans into objects and love into a weapon. Sporus' existence under Rome's new rulers was a continuation of his nightmare, a life stripped of agency, passed like a relic among men hungry for power. After Nero's suicide, Galba claimed him first, seeing in Sporus a way to legitimize his rule by tying it to Nero's mythos. Dressed as Sabina, Sporus was displayed at banquets, his presence a grotesque nod to continuity. But Galba's reign was short. Assassinated within months, he left Sporus to Otho, a man who'd once been Nero's friend. Otho's fascination was darker, more personal. He didn't just parade Sporus, he reveled in the fiction, calling him Poppaea in private, forcing him to reenact intimate moments from a marriage that wasn't his. The boy's compliance was mechanical, his spirit buried deeper with each performance. Vitellius, the next to seize power, was no kinder. He planned a public spectacle, intending to cast Sporus in a theatrical reenactment of a mythic rape, a final humiliation to cement his dominance. But Sporus, pushed beyond endurance, chose escape. In 69 AD, at barely 17, he took his own life, ending the torment that had defined his existence. His death was no triumph, it was a final act of defiance, the only control he could claim. Ancient sources, like Dio Cassius, are brief, almost dismissive, but the silence screams. Sporus wasn't mourned, he was erased, his tragedy too uncomfortable for Rome's chroniclers. Yet his story reveals the rot at the empire's core. The same elites who cheered Nero's spectacles, who bowed to his madness, perpetuated Sporus' suffering. Their complicity wasn't just cowardice, it was a system built on exploiting the powerless, where a boy could be mutilated, renamed, and paraded for the amusement of the powerful. Religion, too, was corrupted. Nero's cult of Poppaea, adopted by his successors, turned sacred rites into tools of propaganda, masking human sacrifice as divine will. Sporus' face, his curse, was a mirror to Rome's decay, a society that worshipped power over humanity, where emperors played gods and boys paid the price. His story wasn't unique, it echoed in the shadows of history, in rituals where elites reshaped lives to fit their desires, their gods, their lies. As we descend deeper, Sporus' tragedy begs a question. What other truths lie buried, too horrific for the light? Sporus' death didn't end his story, it cemented it as a haunting indictment of power's corruption. His suicide, a desperate grasp for freedom, left no ripple in Rome's annals. The elite moved on, their feasts and conquests uninterrupted, but the boy's tragedy lingers, a ghost in history's margins. He was a victim of a system where absolute power turned humans into tools, their identities erased to serve the whims of gods on earth. Nero's act wasn't just personal madness, it was a symptom of a world where elites, emperors, priests, senators, wielded divine authority to justify atrocities. From Egypt's pharaohs to Babylon's kings, history whispers of similar rituals, bodies altered, lives reshaped, all to feed the egos of the powerful. Sporus' castration, his forced transformation, mirrored ancient practices where the powerless were sacrificed to appease gods or glorify rulers. In Rome, religion was no sanctuary, it was a weapon. Nero's cult of Poppaea, with its temples and priests, wasn't worship, it was control, a way to sanctify his obsession and silence dissent. Later rulers, inheriting this fiction, used it to legitimize their own cruelty, parading Sporus as proof of their divine right. This wasn't just one boy's suffering, it was a pattern, repeated across centuries, where the elite twisted faith to mask their abuses. The psychological toll on Sporus was unimaginable, yet it reflected a broader truth. Power thrives on breaking minds. Nero's court, with its forced smiles and whispered fears, was a microcosm of an empire built on subjugation. Senators who applauded Sporus' role as empress knew the truth but chose silence, their survival tied to complicity. This wasn't unique to Rome. From medieval courts to modern cabals, the powerful have always reshaped the weak, through rituals, laws, or lies, to maintain control. Sporus' story, though extreme, is a thread in this dark tapestry, where human lives are currency for the elite's desires. His face, his curse, was a mirror to a society that valued power over humanity, where a boy could be unmade for resembling a dead woman. As we plunge deeper, the question grows heavier. How many others like Sporus were erased, their screams buried beneath the weight of history's silence? What truths remain hidden, waiting for us to uncover if we dare? Sporus' tragedy wasn't an anomaly, it was a symptom of a world where power and divinity intertwined to crush the human spirit. Nero's act of remaking a boy into his dead wife wasn't just madness, it was a ritual of control, echoing across history's darkest corners. Ancient elites, from Persian kings to Mesoamerican priests, performed similar acts, mutilating bodies, rewriting identities, to assert dominance over life itself. In Rome, Nero's cult of Poppaea wasn't worship but propaganda, a tool to bend reality to his will. Priests, complicit, crafted rituals that deified his obsession, turning a murdered woman into a goddess and a tortured boy into her shadow. This wasn't faith, it was psychological warfare, a way to silence dissent and glorify cruelty. Sporus, forced to live as Sabina, was a living sacrifice, his pain a testament to an emperor's godhood. The court's silence, their willingness to play along, revealed a deeper rot, a society where fear replaced morality, where elites upheld lies to preserve their place. This pattern stretches beyond Rome. In forgotten temples, in shadowed courts, the powerful have always reshaped the powerless, through castration, sacrifice, or indoctrination, to serve their myths. Sporus' story mirrors these horrors, his identity erased not just by Nero but by a system that saw humans as tools. His successors, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, continued the charade, each using Sporus to bolster their own myths, proving the cycle of abuse wasn't personal but systemic. The psychological control was absolute. Sporus had to perform to bury himself or face death. His suicide, a final act of defiance, was less a victory than a surrender to a world that offered no escape. Yet his story haunts because it's not unique. History hides countless others, boys, girls, slaves, subjects, whose lives were unmade to serve the powerful. Religion, meant to uplift, was twisted into a tool of subjugation, sanctifying horrors under the guise of divine will. As we near the end of this descent, Sporus' face lingers, a reminder of what power can do when unchecked. The elite's rituals, their lies, their gods were built on the broken. The question now isn't just what happened to Sporus, it's what secrets still lie buried, what horrors wait in the shadows of history, daring us to look. Sporus' story ends but its shadow clings, a chilling reminder of power's cost. His life, stolen to feed Nero's madness, was no mere tragedy, it was a warning, etched in blood across history's pages. The boy, remade as Poppaea, lived a lie so complete it erased him, his pain a mirror to a world where elites twist humanity to fit their desires. From Rome's palaces to distant empires, the pattern repeats. Bodies broken, identities erased, all to serve gods and kings who play at divinity. Nero's cult of Poppaea, his court's complicity, the priests who sanctified his cruelty, these weren't accidents but a system, one that thrives in shadows, hiding truths too vile for light. Sporus' final act, his suicide, was his only rebellion, a scream against a world that saw him as nothing. Yet history barely whispers his name, burying him with the countless others sacrificed to power's hunger. This isn't just Rome's story, it's humanity's, a cycle of corruption where the powerful reshape the weak, where religion and ritual mask unspeakable acts. You've walked this forbidden path, seen what lies beneath the empire's glory. The knowledge changes you, haunts you, binds you to the truth. If you dare carry this secret, hit subscribe, comment, "I carry the shadow," and share this with another soul brave enough to face it. Pass this knowledge like a forbidden scroll because the world doesn't want you to know. Sporus' face, his stolen life, demands we look deeper, question what's hidden. What other horrors lie buried in history's silence? What rituals, what lies still shape our world unseen? The elite's power thrives on our ignorance, but you've seen the truth. Carry it, share it, and never forget. Once you know, you're never the same. The shadow of Sporus lingers, watching, waiting for you to decide. Will you keep his story alive or let it fade back into the darkness?